All right, welcome back to lesson 2 or day 2 in my 5-day intro course to Bitcoin. Today I want to talk to you about the basics of Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin and how does it work? All right. First of all, I think to get rolling on this, the most important thing, there's three main important things to understand about Bitcoin is one, Bitcoin is money. 2, Bitcoin is a network. And 3, Bitcoin is a community. All right, so let's start off with Bitcoin as a network, right? And so when we talk about a network, we're talking about a computer network, right? And many of the services that we use today are networks, right? Starting with things like social media. Those are networks. Those are networks of computers over which people share information and communicate with each other, perform work, get entertainment, various different things. But they are networks. They're computers that are grouped together and where they exchange information. The internet is the basis of this network, right? Well, Bitcoin is a network too. Bitcoin is a network of basically 2 different types of computers. One, the first type of computers, you may have heard this term before, they're called miners, all right? And miners are just computers. The analogy was made to creating Bitcoin like you create gold, right? Gold is mine, Bitcoin is mine. That's why they got the nickname miners. But essentially a miner is just a computer, okay? And it is the miners are the computers that build the record of all the Bitcoin transactions. Every time someone uses Bitcoin, sends it to someone else in return for goods or services or whatever, they broadcast or they send out details of this transaction, this exchange of Bitcoin to the Bitcoin network. The miners, the computers that are in charge of making the record or the ledger, the blockchain is what it's called, which is where all the record, where all the transactions are kept. The miners making the blockchain listen for new transactions, they take them, and the next time they put a new block into the blockchain, or essentially a new page into a ledger, a new group of transactions into the record, that's what miners do. They use a cryptographic algorithm is what it's called, and that is nerd speak for using a very secure process, right? Encrypting this block into the previous block, all right? And through that process, it makes the Bitcoin network very secure. And that's what the Bitcoin miners do, what those computers do. They're very, very good at a very simple job, very simple in terms of there's not a whole lot to what they do. They do the same thing over and over and over and over again. But by doing so, they make Bitcoin very secure. The second type of computers that make up the Bitcoin network are what called nodes. And there's different types of nodes, but for the most part, nodes are the ones in charge of keeping the blockchain, keeping the record, the ledger, the history of all the transactions. Every time someone has used Bitcoin, what address it came from and what address it was sent to. All right, that's what the nodes do. You may hear the term full node a lot. A lot of nodes out there are full nodes. It means they keep a full transaction, like of all the Bitcoin transactions all the way back to day one. So if the network were to go down, everybody except for just one node, that node would be able to keep the Bitcoin network running, would have an accurate record that you could run the network off of. So that is how Bitcoin is a network that people can use to send their money over. The next part of Bitcoin is a community, okay? It's a community of developers, miners, node operators, and investors. And they all want to create a safe, fair, and system for money that's available to everyone, okay? So let's talk about these different groups. Developers. Developers are people that use software programming to improve Bitcoin. So every time they see problems, people will point out problems that are in the Bitcoin network. The developers can put together new code or repair old code that makes the Bitcoin network more efficient, safer, more useful to people, right? So these developers are always looking for problems to fix, and they create improvements for the Bitcoin code, and then they submit it so that it can get used by the Bitcoin network. Miners, okay, miners also refers to people. So if you ever heard miner, if it's not being referred to a computer, it refers to a person, and this is a person that runs a computer, right? A mining computer, if you will, or many of them. So this is a miner, this is a person, this is part of the Bitcoin community who helps to maintain the Bitcoin network by running miners. And they do so because they get paid to do so. All right, there's a process by which they can earn Bitcoin by running miners on the Bitcoin network. But there are also people behind those miners that are incentivized to do this, and they're part of the community. They are part of what makes Bitcoin what it is, part of what makes Bitcoin so successful. They're one of the factors, okay? So miners refers to people that are on the Bitcoin network. It also refers, as we talk to people that use their time and resources to maintain the Bitcoin network. And one other thing that we need to know is that miners are also influential, and they make decisions on which code to run on their mining units on the Bitcoin network. And this has an effect on how the Bitcoin network performs today and in the future. So they also have a say-so on what direction Bitcoin is going. That's the miners. So the next group of people are node operators. Node operators are people that run Bitcoin nodes, okay? Node operators also have another function. They can propose improvements to the code of the Bitcoin network, all right? And node operators help keep Bitcoin, also another function that they do by running their nodes, they help keep Bitcoin decentralized, right? And decentralized means that all the control of the network is not concentrated into one person or one group of people or a small group of people, right? It's spread out. Every time someone sets up a new node, wherever they are in the world, they help spread out the control of Bitcoin, act as a check and a balance against people taking over too much power in the network and abusing it to their own advantage, okay? So the last group of people that are part of the Bitcoin community are investors, all right? Anybody who buys Bitcoin is an investor technically, right? They're a Bitcoin user. They could be even called a Bitcoiner if you want to use that term. I would say a Bitcoiner is someone who's real, definitely like heavily passionate about Bitcoin, and not all investors, Bitcoin investors, are that passionate. Some of them are just using it lightly, casually, haven't put much thought into it, but they still have an impact on the overall community, because when people buy and sell Bitcoin, it affects the price of Bitcoin. So everybody participating in that, it helps to build and strengthen the network. And they do this by sending signals to the rest of the network, right? When a large amount of people, a large amount of Bitcoin investors are selling off their Bitcoin, Bitcoin's price goes down, and it causes the rest of the community to look around and ask, why is this happening? Okay, why is this going down? Are these people cashing in? Is it getting close to Christmas time and they're cashing in so they've got some extra funds at Christmas? Have there been some problems lately that are worrying these people, so they're exiting Bitcoin because they are afraid their Bitcoin investment might lose value, or other reasons, right? And so every time investors buy or sell, they're sending a small signal, but the overall investor community at large sends big signals at times to the rest of the Bitcoin community, letting them know that something significant may be happening. What is it? How can we deal with it? Do we even need to deal with it, right? So all these groups work together to make Bitcoin a very impressive and very strong community. And that, again, that's miners, people who run mining computer, node operators, the people that run the nodes, that keep the blockchain, the full record of the network, the developers who work on the code that the Bitcoin network runs on, and then the investors, the people who are buying, investing Bitcoin and telling people, the rest of the community, whether Bitcoin is doing well, whether it's doing not, or whether there's other events that are affecting the Bitcoin community. They all play a part in this community. Last, Bitcoin is money, okay, in terms of how it works. Now, we're not talking about like yesterday and or lesson 1, how Bitcoin has value. Today, we're just talking about Bitcoin. One of the 3 things that it is, besides a network, besides a community, it is money. It is a medium of exchange. That's a nerd term that means it's something that can be traded for something else, right? Dollars are a medium of exchange. Gold is a medium of exchange. Those two things can be traded for other things that people want or need. Bitcoin's the same way. It is a form of money. It is widely accepted all over the world now. You can use Bitcoin in places that you cannot use dollars. You can take Bitcoin safely to places it's not safe to take gold. It's easier to use than gold because you may have a dispute if you're carrying gold around about how much your gold is worth in relation to what you're trying to buy or whatnot. Bitcoin is amazingly more simple to divide than gold. So it has a lot of value. It's very widely used. It is a form of money. It is a way that people can trade Bitcoin for other things that they want or need. Okay, so how does Bitcoin work, right? Now that we know about all these things, how does this happen? And this is in the most simplest terms possible here. Bitcoin users, an investor who uses Bitcoin, someone who has Bitcoin decides to make a transaction. They decide to exchange their Bitcoin for a good, a service, a product, what have you. All right, and so they decide to send their Bitcoin to someone else, to another Bitcoin user. When they use their wallet to create this transaction, their transaction is broadcast out to the entire Bitcoin network, right? The miners hear this transaction and they'll include it into the next available block of the blockchain, of the record of all the Bitcoin transactions, right? Once that is transactions processed and now it's part of the blockchain, it will be recorded on the nodes. So all the node operators that are out there running nodes, those nodes will gather up those new blocks and put them into the record, the blockchain that they keep a record of, right? And essentially that is how Bitcoin is used. And that these computers that make up the network make it extremely efficient, extremely fast to send Bitcoin, and extremely secure. That's another thing. There really is not a more secure form of money than Bitcoin. And that is what Bitcoin is in a very simple sense, right? To recap, Bitcoin is money, right? It is something that we can trade for something else that we want. It's something that we can store value on for long periods of time safely, all right? But Bitcoin is also a network. It is a network of computers, right? Of those two different types of computer that that create and maintain the records of all of the blockchain, of all the Bitcoin transactions, and they do it in an extremely safe way. It is probably the hardest thing to hack in the entire world, all right? It is amazingly secure. And lastly, Bitcoin is a community. There is 4 different groups of people out there that are highly motivated and passionate about Bitcoin and making it safe, secure, easy to use anywhere in the world, and to continue to have and create value for people who use Bitcoin, all right? So again, last recap, Bitcoin is money. It can be traded, it can be saved, it can be used now, it can be used down the road to trade for things that you want. Bitcoin is a network, right? It's a network that makes and maintains in the most secure way possible a record of all the Bitcoin transactions. And lastly, Bitcoin is a community of people that are working to make money safe and fair and accessible for everyone in the world.